This is Devil May Cry 3. I'm Waifu. And we're going to be running new game normal, which means a new game file and on the normal difficulty. This game, if you don't know, is early PS2 game, all about style and action combat. And because of that, we got a lot of different ways that we are able to fight enemies. In this game specifically, you start off with 4 available styles. And we're gonna be using the last one that's available to select, Royal Guard, for the whole run. That's because you're able to do 6 stuff like I just did there at the opening and insta-kill a bunch of enemies. The way I'm doing that is I am doing a gold release, is what it's called. Royal Guard's all about blocking and releasing enemy attacks to do massive damage with really good timing. Every time you see me zoom through an enemy like that and you hear a zoom, that's me hitting a 3-frame window trick on a gold release. So you only have 3 frames to hit it, which means it's really hard. The game runs at 60 FPS, so if you do the math, that's like 1/20th of a second to react. So it makes it pretty difficult. So that was mission 1. We didn't get an S rank, which is fine. If you've ever seen a run of like Devil May Cry 1 or something, you'll know that S ranks are super important because they give you lots of money. But in this game, fortunately, the S ranks are not required at all. The money route's not tight at all. In fact, this game is all about execution. There's really not much insane routing going on. It's more about just being able to execute the strats. And speaking of executing, right there I just blocked an attack. And you saw the ting and the blue shiny light, like that. That means I perfectly blocked an attack. That's a little bit easier than a release. If you look at the top left by my health bar, there's a couple of circles there. And you'll see one of them is glowing now because I blocked that explosion. And that is because that's the other part of Royal Guard. You're able to release, but you're also able to charge up. Every time you successfully block an attack, you charge up your release, and it does a bunch more damage on top of the already existing damage. Like you saw there, I just did a ton of damage with a gold release there, because it was charged. And so the whole run basically revolves around getting charge and then releasing it, because it does a ton of damage. And that's mission 2. The only times it's really important to get an S rank are mission 1 and 2. If you get an S rank on both, you can buy a move called Stinger on mission 3 at the start. This saves probably about 10 seconds. It's not a huge deal, but it's nice. Unfortunately, since I got an A rank on mission 1, we can't do that. So we're walking instead of yawing. So blocking and releasing aren't the only things that you can do with Royal Guard. There's also some other things. Since you're supposed to be able to react quickly and block pretty much anything in the game, you're able to cancel almost all of your animations midway through by blocking. So that leads me to what I'm doing here, which is called shotgun canceling. Basically what I'm doing is I'm shooting, then blocking to remove the recovery animation of the shooting of the shotgun, and then just shoot, block, shoot, block, shoot, block, shoot, block, shoot, block to shoot really fast. And it is the highest damage output we can do at the moment. Woo! So if any of you guys have played this game before, I'm playing on normal, which, if you played the original version of the game in America, was hard mode. But in the special edition, they fixed that. That was due to a translation error. And because of that, a lot of people's first experiences with this game were it being absurdly hard, like way harder than it's supposed to be. Especially this boss that we're about to fight here, Cerberus. He's a three-headed doggo. He's a pretty good boy, but he is really difficult, especially on the harder difficulties and on new games, because we don't really have anything that we can use against him that is like really effective. We just have our super basic kit at the moment. And because of that, it makes him one of the harder bosses in the run. And he has ruined a lot of people's experience with this game, especially on the original version of the game. Basically, he has 3 different heads that all have different attack patterns. And you can kill the heads individually, but which head is out is random. And there are some that are definitely worse than others. We're just gonna do our best here. This is the worst possible head to have left, but it seems like he's gonna give us good attacks. Yeah, see, like this is the worst attack because you can't attack him while he's doing it. So this is the worst head to have last. And Cerberus, once we beat him there, is going to start a trend of bosses giving us weapons after we beat them. This is super important because some of the weapons are really good. We always keep our starting sword Rebellion throughout the whole run, but having other weapons is really important. Like I said earlier, with the shotgun canceling, by pressing the block button to interrupt our shotgun animation, we were also doing that with our sword swings as well. We were swinging twice and then pressing block to cancel the animation, and then swinging twice again, so we wouldn't stun the enemies and make them fly away. Now we're no longer gonna do that. We're gonna do switch canceling instead, which is very similar, but instead of blocking to cancel the animation, we're gonna switch weapons. And now that we have 2 swords at the same time, or 1 sword and 1 pair of nunchucks, we can actually do so. And it's faster than switch cancel, or than canceling with the guard, because you're canceling into another attack, so you do more damage. Yeah, so the fastest way to do damage with these 2 weapons is to switch cancel like that, and we're going to do that a lot throughout the run. Particularly because it doesn't knock enemies backwards. Like here, we don't want them to knock into a wall and fly away from us. So just alternating our combo like that will do us good. Having a good sense of crowd control is really important in this game, because there's some particular mechanics that you want to group enemies up for, like that. That was perfect. The doors, for instance, will attack you if you stand too close to them, which means that you're going to want to group enemies near the doors, and so you can build your guard meter off of blocking the doors as they attack you, or releasing into the door, like I did there, to kill the last 2 enemies. And like I said, it's really important to have charged up meter for certain boss cycles and whatnot. A perfect example of that is this room. We need to leave with at least 1 block. Oh, that's not good. So ideally we leave with 1 block so that we can try to get the 2 cycle on this boss, or even the 1 cycle if we get really good RNG. But unfortunately there I kind of choked it. We can still get the 2 cycle, but it's a lot harder. So we'll see how that goes. This is when I would normally release, but I don't have release. Okay, that's a good setup for the 2 cycle. That was unfortunate. That's fine. We'll get the 3 cycle. It's not that much slower. Excuse me, sir. Could you die, please? Sir? Thank you. Oh well. Scuffed, but that is one of the harder bosses, especially if you end up choking it. And, don't have release when you come into the fight. But that's fine. The problem with that boss is after that second cycle, when he comes back through, it's random which hole he's going to come out of. So it's really important to get that 2 cycle. So these new enemies are called blood goyles. They turn to stone when you shoot them. And it's really important that you do shoot them and not just try to swing on them immediately. Because they actually split in half and duplicate if you don't shoot them first. And sometimes they could do it on their own, like they try to do there. And you could quickly end up with a room full of enemies where, you know, there was only supposed to be like 3 if you let them split a bunch of times. So this is Jester. He is actually an exclusive boss fight to the special edition version of the game. So if you're playing the original version, you wouldn't ever fight this guy. It's just a cool little addition in the special edition. The special edition also adds a few other things, like a Bloody Palace mode, which is like a challenge mode, and a whole nother playable character, Virgil. But there is no PC version of the original, unfortunately. He is a cool fight. And that was a really good fight. Like a perfect fight. We got a nice 1 cycle on him there. So now we're just trying to backtrack a little bit so we can get to the next boss. This is one of the only missions in the game where you fight more than 1 boss. And that's just because of the special edition version. Well, that was a very nice setup. So yeah, as you can tell, the run boils down to a lot of getting rid of enemies as quickly as possible in rooms. And thankfully, there are no RNG enemy spawns in this game. The enemies are always going to spawn in the same place every time. What they do can be a little bit different every time, but they're always going to be in the same spot, which is really important for being able to do it fast. So I said that that Jester fight was optional, or was not optional. That's because there are 3 Jester fights in the run, or in the game rather, and 2 of them are optional, but that is the only one that's not. But one of my donation incentives that I put for my run usually is to do all bosses, potentially. Which would mean I'd have to fight all of them and do all the bosses on Mission 18 on the boss rush. So here is that classic Capcom elevator. Basically, the way it works, if there's too many enemies on the elevator, it'll fall down. So you gotta kill all of them fast. And I am killing them in a stylish way on purpose to get the most orbs. And jumping to make it end early. So here we're gonna fight a new couple of bosses, Agni and Rudra. This boss fight's really cool. You fight 2 enemies at once, and if you kill them too far apart, then what'll happen is they'll combine together, which is really bad because it's a 20-second unskippable cutscene, and they're a lot harder to fight afterwards. So what we're trying to do is we want to parry them twice each to knock the swords out of their hands, and then just shotgun cancel until they die. And hopefully, if you do it right, you stun lock them in the middle for the whole fight until they're dead. That was a great fight. That was a great fight. So now that we beat them, we got one of the best weapons in the game, Agni and Rudra. We took their heads as our swords, and now we have 3 swords at our disposal. I'm going to go ahead and switch to that right away, because they are a lot better than Cerberus. So now our objective is to beat 2 out of 3 of the trials here to go onward. If you beat all 3 of the trials here, you'll get a special weapon called Artemis, which is actually a terrible gun that is... you'd be hard pressed to find a use for it, even with stylish play. So we're just gonna skip it. Poor Artemis. Excuse me, sir. I kind of want to ride on you. Can I? Thank you. Thank you. Woo! So the first one we do there is like a test of agility, and this one is a test of wisdom. It's a puzzle, basically, or a riddle. And we just know the combination, so we go right through it real fast. The third one is like a test of strength, where you're supposed to fight a whole bunch of enemies that devil trigger, which is a feature that is normally only in the Dante Must Die difficulty of the game. Basically, it makes the enemies like super tanky and really hard. And that's mission 6. So now that we're done with that, we're on to, in my opinion, the hardest mission of the game, mission 7. This mission is really hard because it has 3 rooms that are really difficult, that require lots of very good jump canceling. Now, jump canceling is a lot like slash canceling, like we were doing earlier with the sword, or switch canceling, or guard canceling. It's very similar. I'm sure you could guess how you do it. You jump. Basically, in this game, you have enemy step, which is an ability that lets you jump off of enemies' heads. And this resets your aerial combos and your jumps, like your double jumps. So what you can do is jump at an enemy, do an aerial attack, and then jump off their head, then do the aerial attack again, then jump off their head, and rinse and repeat until they're dead. The problem with this is it's actually really hard to perform, especially with certain attacks. But Agni and Rudra has a really good aerial attack for this. And so we're going to try to kill these enemies as fast as we can with jump canceling in particular. The reason this is hard is because it's difficult to execute, 1. And 2, it's really punishing because the enemies that we're jump canceling here have a really small hitbox. So it's easy to go above their head. And they're summoners. They don't actually attack you directly. They spawn more enemies. So if you mess up and they spawn more enemies, then you have to kill more enemies, and that's slow. Uh-oh. Woo! That's not good. And there's these woo poles where Dante does a sick woo and swings around the room. It's really awesome. It's also the same inputs that it is to do an aerial attack. That was a good first room, though. That is 1 of 3 rooms with greeds, those enemies that spawn more enemies. And the next one is the dangerous one, because the next one spawns lusts, which are the red enemies that dash at you quickly. Usually, you're stuck they spawn prides, which are the black enemies that we saw at the start of the game. And they die really fast, but lusts have a lot more HP and are way more aggressive. So it's actually pretty possible to die in this room if you do it really poorly. And like the slower you are with your jump cancels, the more enemies will spawn, and it just gets exponentially worse and worse. Oh, also, Agni and Rudra's switch cancel is really good. It does a lot of damages really fast. Oh, and you can't jump cancel the side of the coffin, just his body. So if he turns on you like that, then you can't hit him. Ah! Don't die. There we go. That was kind of bad, but we take what we can get. Sometimes they'll just like not let you jump cancel them. They'll just like keep turning away. Nice stinger. That's a good movement. Let's keep turning away and just like walk away. Or walk into a wall, and you're just like, oh, okay, well I can't do a lot of damage to you, so I just gotta like hope that you don't spawn a bunch of enemies. Also, whenever possible, blocking and then releasing is like really, really strong, so I try to do that all the time. Like if an attack's coming at me, and I have the opportunity, I'm gonna go for the block, or the release, like that, because it does a lot of damage. More than jump canceling, even. So I say this mission is the hardest one in the game. It's not just because of these rooms. There's also a hard boss fight coming up. The first Virgil boss fight. Virgil in this game, if you don't know, is your twin brother, who is really strong, and he's the main antagonist in this game. And our job is to stop him, essentially. And now that we've reached the top of the tower, we're gonna have a epic anime fight with him. And the reason that these fights are so hard is because the strats for these fights basically boils down to land your blocks and release. And if you don't, then you're screwed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3. Ouch. Okay, that was a decent fight. So, you might have heard me, I was counting out there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2, 3. And that's because if you ever played Kingdom Hearts, Virgil has a very similar mechanic to the revenge mechanic in Kingdom Hearts, which basically means that the actual amount of damage that you do based on his stun is not, it doesn't relate to his stun. Like, his stun doesn't reset based off damage, it resets based off of the stun that you do to him. So what you want to do is do the attacks that do the least amount of knockback but the most amount of damage. And the best way to do that is to slash cancel and then finish with a full combo. So that's what we do. And for fighting him, we get Devil Trigger, which, if you've never played a Devil May Cry game, is basically a god mode. You do more damage, you're faster, You have access to exclusive attacks that you wouldn't have otherwise. You take less damage, you heal. It's basically, yeah, it's super powerful. And in this game, there's a special ability you can do with Devil Trigger that you can't do in any of the other Devil May Cry games, called Devil Trigger Explosions. Basically, how that works is if you charge Devil Trigger, it'll build up and you can release it all at once to do massive damage. And that in conjunction with Royal Guard, which we now have level 2 of, we can do a whole ton of damage all at once. I forgot to mention it, but after Agni and Rudra, we leveled up to level 2 with the Royal Guard. And that's important because it unlocked another orb for us to fill with our Revenge Meter at the top. And it also means that we can now release and block while in the air, which is important because it makes releasing and blocking way easier. It makes it easier because jumping has invincibility frames. So when you jump, it buffers your release timing off of those invincibility frames. So basically, it gives you a bigger leeway into how tight the blocks are. So a release might not be 3 frames like I said before. It might be significantly easier. I wouldn't know exactly how many frames, but a lot easier. And since we could charge more, and we have more Devil Trigger to do explosions, and when you're in Devil Trigger, the releases do more damage. We could do that to do some crazy damage on some bosses, which you'll see here in a second. Lore-wise, Virgil beat us up. He won the fight, actually, even though we did really good. And he stabbed us in the chest with our own sword, which is the secret to unlocking our Devil Trigger. Very anime, I know. And then we got mad and jumped off the building and got eaten by a giant fish, and that's what we're fighting right now. Yeah, best cutscene in the game. Good 2-cycle. So you saw there, like, as I came into the fight, I had full release, and I charged up my Devil Trigger and released it all at once, and it did like almost half of his HP in one hit. It only gets better as we get further along with Royal Guard level 3, but unfortunately we don't get that till like way later. So now, this is the first time so far, I believe, that we're introduced to elemental damage. A lot of the weapons in this game are based off elements. Like Cerberus is based off ice, and Agni and Rudra is wind and fire. And this actually does a little bit more or less damage to certain enemies depending on what they are. Like, for instance, the spiders here take more damage to Agni and Rudra, and they catch on fire. That's how you know how. Unfortunately, it's not enough of a damage difference to warrant ever switching weapons because of that. So, as you've noticed so far, I'm sure, this is a fairly vanilla speedrun. There hasn't been any, like, crazy, like, skips or anything. In fact, there's no out of bounds whatsoever. Except for right here. This is the only one in the whole run. And it's really cool, so hopefully I can get it. Nice, that was great. So that's the zip. That's the only skip in the whole game. And it's RNG based, essentially. What you need to do is stand in a very specific spot. And gold release, so that 3-frame window trick, off of the archer's arrow. Now the reason that's random is because the archer actually has to hit you. and their aim is really, really bad. So sometimes that could take a while. It only saves like 20 seconds and isn't a huge skip, but it's really cool. So I want to show it off. Like if I did it like that, it would definitely save time. That was awesome. So that's the prime example of why I hug the doors while I'm fighting enemies. So the enemies came towards me and I went into Devil Trigger and then released off of the door, and it pretty much almost insta-killed both of them. It's a lot faster than like manually killing the enemies. It's not something that you could set up every time or anything, because the AI is a little bit unpredictable. But setting up for stuff like that to have the opportunity is really important. And now we're heading over to Navon, which is a really cool boss. She is a bat lady who, once we defeat her, will give us an electric guitar weapon that summons bats. Coolest thing in the game, hands down. Unfortunately, it's terrible, just like Artemis, so we never use it. But I'm going to try to get a 2-cycle here. We'll see if I can get it. I need to get really good switch cancels, good release, and good RNG on her attack. So we'll see. Ah, it's not good. Oh man, that's really not good. Yeah, no two cycle for me. That's fine though. We can get 3 cycles, not that much slower. It's one of the hardest cycles to get in the game. Damn. Kiss cycle. So what happened there is she did something known as the kiss cycle, which is where she will go into the center of the arena and just release her shield. She just lets you attack her. But the flip side is if you try to attack her, she'll start kissing you and sucking all your health. And it actually regenerates her HP and does a ton of damage to you. And we never upgrade our health in the run, not once, so it could easily insta-kill you probably at this HP. I would not be surprised. But thankfully, if you have Devil Trigger, if you activate Devil Trigger, she'll instantly let go of you or not even be able to kiss you at all. Woo! But ideally you never see that because you get the 2-cycle, but the cycles in this game are really hard. So this game is kind of all over the place when it comes to its enemy designs. It's either got fantastic 10 out of 10 enemy designs like all of the 7 Sins, or some totally garbage characters or enemy designs like these dual hands here. I don't know what they were thinking, but they're like all over the place. These dual hands are terrible. You can't combo them at all. There's no fast way to kill them really, and there's no stylish way to fight against them. And unfortunately, there's no zip back on the way back. Just a few stinger slides. That was a great release. Did a lot of damage. The spontaneity of this run is what I like about it so much. Is like, you get some really cool moments like that, where you just kind of like, oh, there's an attack coming, what should I do? And that like split-second decisions can save you a lot of time and be really interesting. As long as you execute on them. And that's mission 10 clear. We're halfway through the game already, 35 minutes in. So now we move on to mission 11, which has one of the harder bosses in the run for sure. It has Beowulf, and Beowulf is interesting because he has a weak spot on his eye, and this weak spot is really a weak spot. Like, if you hit him on the eye, it does a ton of damage. Now, the only problem with that is, that means it's hard to hit because it's small, obviously, his eye. And obviously in the speedrun, you're trying to do the most damage possible. So you gotta release, you have to do a gold release fully charged in his eye while devil triggered. And that's simply really hard to do. And if you don't do it, it loses like 40 seconds because it does like a third of his health bar if you do it properly. So it's really easy to choke that. We'll see if I get that in a bit here. It's like one of the more hype things in the run if you get the release. But for now, we're stuck fighting some of the more annoying enemies in the game. Not quite. I would say they're probably worse than the dual hands even. They have no clip, and they don't take damage when you're looking at them. It's fantastic. That was a good fight. Where are you going, sir? Thank you. Thank you, thank you. So upcoming here, we got a nice little section where we ride this cart over to the boss arena. And this cart may seem like an auto-scroller at first, but it's actually not. It's based off of how fast you kill the enemies. Which is good, because that means we have more enemies to kill. But this is like super straightforward. You just knock them all together and then switch cancel them. Because switch canceling with Agni and Rudra and Rebellion is really good. It's even better than shotgun canceling, I believe. So we won't see that much shotgun canceling for the rest of the game, unfortunately. Even though it's really cool. So yeah, sometimes you'll see me taunt like that. I'll go, do a little taunt. And that actually raises your style meter, as well as gives you devil trigger. So if you see me taunting at an enemy, that's why, to get more devil trigger. It's not just for style, although it is for that too. Okay, here's the boss fight. I choked the release. That's okay though. I can still make it a good fight if I just keep them locked here. I choked it again. Damn. That's okay. This is still a really good fight. I kept him in the corner for a while. And there is a boss rush later where we do have to fight him again. So we'll have another chance to hit it there. We'll have another chance to hit it there. So from one choke heavy boss to another, this mission has probably the easiest to choke boss in the run. The time horse. But before that, we picked up an item that gives us unlimited devil trigger at the expense of our HP. So our HP is slowly draining, but we are stuck with infinite devil trigger. It's just a plot thing. We gotta bring it to the other side of the level so we can open the way forward. Fortunately, you don't really have to worry about dying in this mission. It's really easy not to die. I don't think I've ever actually died in this mission in the speedrun, even though your health is consistently draining. The enemies drop like way more HP than they normally do. And since you do so much damage, you kill them really fast. Oops. This mission's like really straightforward, you just gotta go to the end. But the boss is quite something. It's pretty cool being able to have unlimited devil trigger. This is something that you wouldn't normally be able to do unless you beat very hard or Dante Must Die, the two hardest difficulties in the game. There's a costume that you unlock if you do that gives you infinite devil trigger. And there's actually ways to play co-op in this game if you do so, which is really cool. There's a fighting style called Doppelganger that I'll get later on near the end of the game. And if you plug a second controller in while using that style and have unlimited devil trigger, the second controller controls the Doppelganger, so you can play co-op. It's really neat. Not many people know that. And that even works on the PC version as well. Oh my god, that was sick. Wow. I just gold released, threw every enemy in the room all at once and killed them all. That was cool. So there is the second Jester fight, the first optional Jester fight. Obviously in any percent like I'm running now, we don't fight that Jester, but if you're doing all bosses, that would be where you'd fight him. We already have our hands full though. We gotta fight the Time Horse. You may know him from games such as Dark Souls 2. Basically, in this game, he's just a huge test of depth perception. In the speedrun, you're supposed to stun lock him in the center of the arena the whole entire fight by doing a downward slash into his face over and over and over again. But it's really easy to mess up. Especially when he gives you something he's not supposed to like that. Saved it though. It requires a whole bunch of consecutive good hits to him like that. This is a really good fight though. He didn't run around the arena, which is perfect. That's what you gotta worry about. Is him getting away from you and running around the arena. It happens a lot.
Too easy.
So next up we got the second Virgil fight, which is really cool because it's the first one that we have Devil Trigger for, which is really important for the Virgil fights because Virgil fights are super phase heavy. They have lots of different phases to them, and now he's also going to have Devil Trigger himself. So not only we have it, he also has it, which is really bad because he has the same properties we do. He does more damage, takes less damage, recovers HP, etc. And obviously you want to skip that if at all possible. So we can do that by using our Devil Trigger and doing so much damage that we skip the phases that he goes into Devil Trigger. And we'll try to do that when we get to that fight here in a second. This mission's really short. But first we got this like really hard puzzle. This puzzle cheats, by the way. It really looks like you're supposed to put it into the object out there, but you're supposed to go like off camera through a wall. It's pretty cheap, if you ask me. It took me like hours when I was a kid to figure that out, because it doesn't really give you any sign that you should. And it's required, it's not even like an optional thing. Okay, I'm gonna focus here on the boss. This is like one of the harder cycle skips in the game. Fuck. I really messed that up? Yeah. Okay. I accidentally go Devil Trigger. That's fine. It's much faster to let him kill me and then just try again. It's all good.
You're not worthy as my opponent.
Oops. Alright, let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There we go. That should do it. So he's gonna switch to Devil Trigger, and I did so much damage that he's gonna teleport to the middle and switch to his third phase with Yamato. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2, 3. So that skips that whole scary phase that I messed up and went into on accident. That's, like I said, one of the harder ones to do in the game. It's pretty precise. If you do like a little bit too much damage, then he'll go into Devil Trigger early and you're just totally screwed. Like I said, it's faster to just die and try again than it is to try to fight him like that. And now that we beat him, we get the best weapon in the game, hands down. Beowulf, the Gauntlets and Greaves. Super strong, especially since in this game they have a really big jump cancel window. Like, they're the easiest weapon in the game to jump cancel by far, and they do the most damage as well, so it's just a win-win. We'll see that soon here as we use it on the chess pieces. But first we gotta fight some more dual hands. The best enemy in the game, obviously. So the story of this game, as it's progressing right now, at this point, is basically that Virgil and Dante got back to the point where Virgil's supposed to be trying to open the portal to the demon world, and Dante's trying to stop him, obviously. And a girl named Lady, who is also there trying to stop something, that something being her father, is also there. And Virgil's trying to get the portal to open to hell, and he can't figure out why it's not working. And it turns out, plot twist, that Arkham, Virgil's right-hand guy, set it all up from the beginning and betrays Virgil and knocks everyone off the tower. And opens the gate to hell and like steals the power for himself. And Arkham is also that jester dude that we fought earlier. So now we got knocked all the way back down to the bottom of the tower and have to climb back up again so we can go fight Arkham. But for now, it's just a bunch of small fights until we can get to some more bosses and progress further. But the progression at this point of the game is really fast. All the missions are really short and just consist of like a couple rooms of enemies, maybe a boss. But we're just going to dive click the planet for the rest of the game, essentially. It's our fastest damage output, except for blocking and releasing. So upcoming is one of the cooler cutscenes in the game. If you don't know, the cutscene direction in this game, if you ever have some time, just watch the cutscenes, like on YouTube or something. They're fantastic. They're amazing. And the cutscene here actually inspired the weapon Cavalier in Devil May Cry 5, because Dante sees Lady's motorcycle falling from the wreckage and rides it up the side of the tower and kills a bunch of demons with it, like using it as a weapon. And that's what inspired Cavalier from DMC5, which is a motorcycle weapon, if you don't know. It's pretty great. So I talked a lot about bad enemy designs in this game. This is the worst of the worst. They're called Fallen. They have no clip, they have a shield, they fly, they can't really be jump canceled, and they don't aggro on you very much. So we just don't fight them. We holy water them. It's just not worth the trouble. Thankfully this game is mostly execution based and there's not like a whole bunch of holy watering all the bosses. But when we holy water stuff, we really holy water stuff. Like I holy water both required fights with the Fallen, and we holy water Arkham to death because that fight is terrible. Speaking of terrible, this is my least favorite mission in the game. This is mission 15. This mission's gimmick is that it has these spinny dials, and the dials control where the doors send you. And it's basically just a puzzle. Like, where are you supposed to go? Collect 3 items, activate an elevator. But when I was younger, it was like super confusing, and sometimes I can even get lost while running the game. But there's the first piece. Thankfully, it's the same every time. If you hit them in the order 2, 1, 2, 2, you always go to the right spot and actually skip a cycle, then you would probably catch casually an optional fight with the spiders. And we're actually going to do our only death warp in the whole game here on near the end of this mission. I'm going to set up for it here. Basically, there's a spot where you have to do some platforming, but the platforming is like absurdly hard and definitely built for you to have double jump. But we never buy double jump in the speed run, so it's just super brutal. And there's a lot of enemies in that room, so it's really easy to die just trying to platform on the way back. So it turns out it's just faster to that's really scary to death warp out after you get the item, but specifically after you get the item. So if I die before I get the item, that's big rip. Don't kill me, please. Please, no. Not yet. I need the items still. This is like optimal HP. Like, this is the fastest death warp setup, but it's scary. I can't see, sir. You're in the way of the camera. Woo! The item's right there. Oh, okay, cool. Jesus Christ. That was scary. Okay, cool. And the death warp sends you right back to the door here, which is exactly where you need to go, fortunately. That was optimal. Fastest possible death warp. Which that's going to lead us to mission 16, which actually is a mission where we end up fighting Lady. She's more of a protagonist. If you look at the story structure of this game, she's actually like the main protagonist, arguably. But she's in our way. And now it's time for the gotchi puzzle, the best puzzle in the game. The solution is to hit the balls together, obviously. But it's just another fallen fight, and we don't like those. Basically, this mission is very similar to the one before. You have two different pathways that you go to, and you just need to collect the items from them. And then you can do the boss fight. This room is really annoying with the blood goyles because two of them spawn up on the roof, and you can't actually reach them anyway, like at the beginning. So a lot of the times they'll split in half before you can even like see them. And to do the optimal Lady fight and skip all of her cycles, we're going to want to have full Devil Trigger and full level 2 release when we get into the fight. So we're going to need to get release off of these chest pieces. And yes, these chest pieces are foreshadowing something. There's actually a really cool room in Mission 18 where you find a whole chest set. Ouch. Same principles apply here as in the Virgil fight. We need to do a certain amount of damage at very specific times so that we can skip her cycles. In particular, she'll like zoom across the room and then start throwing grenades from the ceiling, which is really bad. She's invincible when she does that, basically. But we shouldn't see that. It's actually a really, really easy boss fight. But we're gonna block some bullets. That sometimes happens, but we just gotta catch up to her. This is bad RNG. Good fight though. So, Lady doesn't trust us to finish the job with Arkham because she feels bad since it's her dad. And we're like way, way stronger than her in the lore of the game. So,
Too easy.
she asks to fight us and we beat her. And then she gives us her gun. So now we have a big, long rocket launcher that we can use. Unfortunately, it is also not very good. So we never use it. But it's really cool. If you've ever played a Devil May Cry game, you'll know that platforming is not its strong suit. And this is the one section of the game where you're required to do intensive platforming. And it's a nightmare. But I did it really good. Pog. So that there was the last and final. Last and final, yep. That was the last optional fight. The Jester fight there. But we just skip right over it because we're not doing all bosses. You can actually release through these spikes, and it's a lot faster than going around them. But it's really hard, and if you mess up, then that happens. You'd have to do a perfect gold release on every single spike all the way through. It's really hard. I've seen it done though. So here we are introduced to a new enemy. They're interesting because they will always bounce back. If you ever do an attack that does a bunch of knockback to them, they'll always instantly charge back at you, which is really good for using Royal Guard, because that means that you're able to just stack on top of itself endless Royal Guards off of them. And we'll do that a bit later. So now we're almost back to the top of the tower, and we have one last boss fight before we get into the crazy stuff. This is going to be Doppelganger. This fight has a cool gimmick. You can't hit him if he's not in the light. So you have to lure him into the light and then turn it on and then hit him a bunch. We can get a nice one cycle here if we get our jump cancels really good. Here we go. Let's see if I get it. I choked it. I jumped a little bit too high on the last one, and it caused me to go over him. And the jump cancel hitbox on the back end is not nearly as good on the front end. Oh well. It was still a good fight. And that gives us the style Doppelganger, which we could use if we wanted to with Infinite Devil Trigger to be able to play co-op indefinitely, which is really cool. I mentioned that a bit earlier, but that's where you get it. You just gotta plug a second controller in and press start whenever it's active. And you get like a second player that you can control. So now we go into some of the coolest level design areas of the game. And one of the coolest fights as well, the chess set. By default, they're all blacked out, the chess pieces. And you can't hit them unless they come out of their blacked out state, which they don't normally do. But if you holy water next to the king and kill one of the pawns with it, it'll take him out of that blacked out state, and then you can start fighting him. And I did that perfectly right there, that fight. I got the release and then used it and then killed him. And just like regular chess, if you kill the king, it's GG, you win. So now we're at the Capcom Classic Boss Rush. But this one's cool, it has a little bit of a unique twist. You fight all the bosses again, except for the Virgil fights. And you only have to fight enough bosses to make a circle on a board. And you can make whatever circle you want. They arranged it so that the hardest bosses were the smallest circle, which is obviously what we do in the speedrun. So that involves Cerberus, Agni and Rudra, and Beowulf again. Which means we get that second chance I was talking about earlier to get that Beowulf release. And yeah, earlier I said that Cerberus is one of the hardest bosses because you don't really have anything to deal with him. Yeah, we have something to deal with him now. Agni and Rudra is really strong against him. And now, both of these bosses that I didn't have Devil Trigger for before, I do now. So I can do them even faster than before. No. Okay, that was close. They almost combined. That was a really good fight, though. That was like a really, really good fight. Okay, now for the last fight of the boss rush, Beowulf. Now we pray that I hit the release, because I really want to do that. It's cool. It does so much damage. It's crazy. I need some guard first, though. There it is. I didn't have full guard, so it didn't do as much damage, but it does a lot of damage. That wasn't the perfect release, but it was still a good one. You can actually kill him before he ever runs away if you do it like totally perfectly. That was still a really good fight. And that got us Royal Guard level 3, which is pretty much useless except for the fact that it lets us stack another ore for our releases. And that we only use it for 2 more bosses, so it's not a huge deal. But what it does do is it gives us a move that's totally useless that I do on accident all the time while trying to release. Alright, switch back to Beowulf, because we're done with Agni and Rudra for the rest of the game. So this is the mission that's all about gimmicks. Mission 19 is really weird with its gimmicks. It has 2 that aren't seen anywhere else in the run, or in the game even. Come on, I need that release. There we go. Thanks for the release. I need that for the next room really badly. Because the next room, you can't actually do damage to the enemies. You have to break these windows. And the windows have a lot of HP, actually. So you need to do a double trigger explosion and a release to kill the windows instantly. And kill these enemies instantly as well. We're also going to need to leave this room with full double trigger and release, but for a very different reason. We got to fight Arkham next, which means we're going to need all that. And this room's gimmick is interesting. That hourglass in the background is actually in real time. If it falls all the way to the end and you haven't killed all the enemies, then it respawns you at the beginning of the room and respawns all the enemies. That obviously never happens in a speed run, but it's an interesting gimmick nonetheless. Because usually the game encourages you to take your time and be stylish with the enemies, but in this room you gotta be fast. Alright, now for the second to last boss in the game. Obviously the best boss in the game. Such a good boss that we're going to buy a whole bunch of items to just cheese it, because fighting him isn't very fun. So I'm just going to do a bunch of damage at the beginning before he dives underground. And then, once he's diving, I'm just going to holy water him to death. There's a couple reasons for this. Once you do more than 50% of his HP, this cutscene will play, and Virgil will come to your side to help you fight. And when that happens, you can't use Devil Trigger, and you can't use your style. So, in the speedrun, that's two of your most powerful assets. Those are your most damage per second. Like, those are really important. You can't use any of them. So, we just holy water through it. Which leaves us to the final boss, which is a lot. It's Virgil 3. It's a lot like Virgil 2. I need to do a specific amount of damage, but not too much, otherwise I'll Devil Trigger. And this requires dive kicking him for like a minute straight. I need him just above 40% HP. Great fight. That's GG. And that's Devil May Cry 3, new game normal.
What's wrong? Is that all you got? Come on, get up. You can do better than that.
So, thanks for watching.